And this is the mad thing about England fans. They'll beat each other up. The language that they use is coming home, bring it home lads, our boys, son. All of this language, like I said, it's warlike rhetoric. Colonialism hasn't left their blood and it hasn't left their tongues. And it's still happening. They treat it like it's their whole life. And when things don't go their way, all hell breaks loose. SubhanAllah, they pull out their private parts. And like in broad daylight, this is what, 3 o'clock I think? And they just start urinating on the bus. They're looking for national pride. And believe me, as Muslims, you don't want to be anything near that. In all honesty, that's a big, big disease.
Alright. If he scores bare goals against England today,
I think it's gonna.
Islamophobia gonna go up.
To be fair, the racism will come out, especially if Saka don't perform. Who else is black in there? Carl Walker will get it. That new centre back, Mark Gahey, he's gonna get it hard. Oh, we needed Maguire. We needed English blood.
That's gonna be homophobic and racist. That's
You know what's mad though? Like, if you think about it, football and war, they're very similar in terms of strategy. In terms of, you know how you have your formation, you have
4-4-2.
whether it's 4-4-2, 4-2-3-1, whatever it is, but the formation of how you actually are structured in football, you have, like, more so now, is that you have to keep your lines. The same way you have in war. The same tactics. Sometimes you might attack on the right flank. You might attack on the left flank. You might have to hold the center. It's very similar. I was reading an article today about it, to be fair. The tactics of football and the tactics of war.
How English is the England football team?
Have you been watching the Euros? Literally, it's hard to recognize how many players are English. There was a meme going around, yeah? 8 out of the 11 players that are starting, 8 of them, they're either migrants, their parents are migrants, or one of their grandparents are migrants. Now, when you look at the population of England, 74% are ethnically English. That doesn't represent the England national team. So what's going on there? We saw with the last Euro finals, I believe, yeah, England versus Italy. Saka, Rashford, and Sancho. They all 3 of them missed their penalties. Now, prior to the penalty shootout and throughout the tournament, they were behind them. You know, Saka's my guy, Bukayo. They were mentioning first name like they were friends. Lions, in a sense, yeah? Rashford, everyone was behind them. Boy, oh boy, when those 3 migrant, sons of migrant footballers, they missed their penalties, the amount of racial abuse that they got was so sad to see. But this is the point that I think people miss. So when you look at the way England's national team is picked, yeah, you can't ignore the parallel between the way the British colonial empire used to pick their soldiers. On the front lines, it was the black man, it was the Asian man, anyone who was coloured. Because the way they used to see anyone who's not English, they used to see them as ape-like, animalistic-like. They used to see them as warriors, not human. So when it comes to football now, they recognize, and this obviously stems from Darwin's theory, and they have a term for it, eugenics, where they see the black man as a physical better specimen. So when it comes to football and it comes to national pride, using the black person, they have no problem with. But guess what? When it doesn't go in their favor, especially in war, when they need to take a risk or things don't go so well planned in war, they'll use them as cannon fodder. Now, the same parallel can be made in football when the black players, they don't perform. When we saw in the last finals, Saka, Rashford, Sancho, they treat them as cannon fodder. Before that, yeah, they're our boys, Bukayo is my guy. After that, monkey-themed memes started to come about, which is so shocking, but it's so telling of how colonialism hasn't left this country. Colonialism hasn't left their blood, and it hasn't left their tongues. And it's still happening. Just look at some of the comments that are made online in terms of where the black people are positioned in the pubs. They're saying that if England lose, we need to be closest to the exit because we don't know what's going to happen. Subhanallah, man. Now, it's not just England. Colonialism, this colonial past, hasn't left France. We saw in the last World Cup between Morocco and France, but we see just generally with the French national team how much racism that there is in France. But when it comes to the national team, I remember at one tournament, pretty much every single player was black. Every single player was a migrant. But they pick and choose. Same thing with Spain. How they're bigging up Lamine Yamal, a migrant. As everyone knows the Spanish to be racist, especially towards Muslims. But when it suits them, like I said, the way it suited them in war, they will embrace them. When it goes wrong for them, when it goes south for them, they'll treat them as cannon fodder. Now, the Euros. You have to remember the Euros, they're looking for continental dominance. They're looking for national pride. And believe me, as Muslims, you don't want to be anything near that. In all honesty, that's a big, big disease.
This whole colonialism, isn't that just in the past?
In the past, just look at the language. The language that they use is coming home, bring it home, lads, our boys, son. All of this language, like I said, it's warlike rhetoric. And we're talking about Britain in the 21st century. Look what they've gone into. They've gone into Iraq. They've gone into Afghanistan. You know what? You got a list. But the biggest one right now, what people cannot forget, is their involvement in Palestine. You're telling me that this is a colonial past? No chance. It runs through their blood. It doesn't come out of people's tongues just out of thin air. It runs through their blood. It's not something of the past. If it was of the past, and if they're really proud of it, then why don't they pay reparations? They don't. Because they know that they're still colonial in their blood. It runs through their blood, it runs through their veins, and that's why sometimes, I know it's not nice to hear, and it's not nice to say, but that's why you even see younger ethnically English people in this country spur out racist statements. It's because it's coming out from their families. It's sad. Wallah, it's sad.
Shouldn't we be grateful little Muslims and support the country we live in at least?
Grateful little Muslims. Look, the best answer to this, is if you look at how Musa alayhi salam, he dealt with Fir'aun. Fir'aun, this argument, anyone who brings this argument is bringing an argument of Fir'aun. Let's put them in the same category. And look at how Musa alayhi salam dealt with him. Musa alayhi salam didn't say, oh, you know what, Fir'aun, I'm sorry, you're my master, you raised me, I was literally in the river and your wife picked me up. None of that. Musa alayhi salam, he understood his command from Allah Azza wa Jal. He understood that he was a Nabi. He had a mission to do. He's not going to be grateful. Why? It's because he knows Allah Azza wa Jal gives rizq. Not Fir'aun. If Musa alayhi salam was grateful to Fir'aun, then I would say, you know what, let's be little grateful Muslims. But we're not, because we take our role models from the Anbiya. Musa alayhi salam was grateful to Allah, no doubt. But he wasn't grateful to Fir'aun. How can you be grateful to a human, that has done so much atrocities, has raped our countries? We want to be grateful to them? No chance. And then they ask, why are we here? We're here because you raped our countries. We're here because you're still involved in our countries. So don't say to us, oh, why are you here? You have to support them. We have no affiliation to this country. In all honesty, people who are migrants in this country, generally, I would say 90% of them, 95% of them, they came as economic migrants and nothing else. They didn't say, oh yeah, I want to be British. You know what? I love the Queen. None of that. So let's get that. Let's put that to the side. And now we're saying support. Subhanallah. Do you see what support means in England? Do you want to be involved in the pubs? When Euro Final 2020, it happened in 21. When it happened in Wembley, the amount of cocaine, the amount of alcohol that was around in Wembley, to the point where they started to lose their heads, even though they've lost their heads already, but they lost their heads to the point where they broke through the barriers and they literally just ran through Wembley Stadium. It was a havoc. Is that what support means? In every single England game, this Euros, you see police getting beaten up. You see the other team's supporters, they're getting bloodied. You see And this is the mad thing about England fans. They'll beat each other up. Sometimes they're so licked out of their head. Sorry for my language. They're so drunk out of their head that they don't know who's the enemy and who's not. They might beat up their best friend. Is that what you want to be for? Is that what you want for support? We don't want to be affiliated to these type of people. And look what they're like, even in their local area. Now, you look at this whole hooligan culture. It originated in the 60s and 70s. And you know what? People now, they think there's nothing wrong with it. In the 60s and 70s, yes, the football fans were beating up each other. But guess who was targeted? It was the black people. And then when it wasn't about football, and I'm sorry to say this on camera again, when they literally, maybe they had enough of fighting each other, they said, let's go packy bashing. Like, come on. Like, these are the same people that we want to be affiliated to. This hooliganism is something that we want to be distant from. It stems from nationalism. And this nationalism, whether it be local or whether it be national, is a disgusting disease. Muslims, to be fair, even non-Muslims, you want to be far, far away from that. So when it comes to supporting England, I don't want that to be support. That's not support that Muslims should be affiliated with. Even the non-Muslims, they don't want to be affiliated with that. Do you actually want to be affiliated with all the domestic abuse cases? When England plays, the domestic abuse cases rise by 50%. Just when England plays. And when England lose, it increases another 38%. And this is the mad one. When England win, it increases 11%. Do you actually want to be associated with that? Do you want to be associated with these guys who are going home when England lose and they're giving their wife a black eye? They're going to their little kids, sometimes infants, and they're just beating them for no reason. Why? It's because their team didn't win? It's more than football. How can that happen? How can you be associated with that stuff? That level of hooliganism is something that we want to be far, far, far away from. It's a filthy disease, nationalism. This nationalism, hooliganism, it comes from nationalism. And it's not just this country. It happens all over the world. You see recently the spat between Morocco and Algeria, when Morocco had a map of the Western Sahara that they laid claim to. And Algeria, they caused an absolute tantrum. These countries, they're pretty much the same people. It's literally an arbitrary line. This disease, it causes death. It causes so much domestic violence in our country. It causes hooliganism. This is why nationalism is a filthy, filthy disease. It has to be, Muslims have to stay away from this. So going back to the question, should we be grateful little Muslims? Do they support us? Do they support Muslims? Look at the case study of Ozil. One of my favorite players, by the way. But look at him. He gave everything for Arsenal. Now, he said something against the Uyghur Muslims, against the Chinese, with regards to the Uyghur Muslims. And Arsenal Football Club had to shun him because they were going to lose a heap load of money from China, because the Premier League is massive in China. Where was the support then? There's countless examples of how Muslims, when they speak out, some of their clubs, they disown him. Idris Gueye from PSG, he spoke out about LGBT. Where was the support then? So why should we support them? Why should we support them when they throw us like cannon fodder? They treat us like cannon fodder when they don't need to use us or when we don't suit the interests of their masters. But when we do, they're all behind them. Look at the French team. Look at the treatment of Benzema and all the other black nationals in the French national team. It's sad. Wallahi, it's sad. And Muslims need to stay well away from this dirty disease. This disease that when Ozil wins, he's German. When he loses, he's a Turk. When Benzema wins, he's French. When he loses, he's Algerian. When Saka, when he scores a goal for England, he's English. When he misses the penalty, he's African. He's a monkey.
You mentioned some crazy statistics of domestic violence. And it begs the question, why is English football culture so uncivilized then?
It's sad. These English fans, they have no purpose. they have no meaning in their life. And they have the biggest void known to mankind. And how do they fill it? You look at the alcohol consumption data, it's astonishing. You have 8 million people who drink to a point where it's a health risk. They have to fill this void with something. They have absolute no purpose. So when England play, they feel like my life has meaning now. And when they don't play, you see them at the pub, day in, day out, drinking their sorrows out. This escapism in a sense, where they have nothing to live for. And then guess what? They go home, again sad, again meaningless, again massive void. So they start beating their wives. Their life is absolute mess. And then because of this lack of purpose, you see the way they treat football. They treat it like a religion. They treat it like worship. Just deep this. Understand this for a second. So you have an English fan, even whether it be local or national fan. His walk to the football stadium is like sa'i, between Safa and Marwa. The way he treats it. You know how we're treating it as Muslims? We're reciting, words of dhikr. They're reciting their dhikr. Come on, boys, all right. They're chanting and whatnot. SubhanAllah is so similar. And then they go into the stadium, and a lot of these fans, they have some superstitious routine. And then, if you deep it, how Muslims, we get up for salah with qiyam, ruku, sujood, the same way they get up. Hey, when they score, they sit back down when it's not quiet. It's so crazy. It's honestly like a worship for them. But they are victims. It's sad that their lack of purpose, their lack of meaning in their life. The thing that bonds them, and we see this when it comes to England's football team or whenever England plays, is nationalism. And it's so weak. It's so fragile. And it's a disease. It's a disease that definitely Muslims, we need to stay way, way well away from. This society, because it's based on this, is so fragile. They would fight for their clubs 1 week. And then the next week, when the England national team are playing, they will unite. These same people that they would leave with, black eyes and broken noses. Their hooliganism, it stops, and then they unite to be hooligans to another team. It's so hollow. And let me give you an example of what I saw. Years ago, I went to a game, Arsenal versus Everton. And unfortunately, I had to go to Everton. I had to go up to this land of the Scousers. And I remember we could only get tickets in the home stand. And I'm an Arsenal supporter. So I'm in and amongst all of these Evertonian fans. And believe me, those who know football, the Scousers, the Scousers, they're the worst supporters. Literally alcohol everywhere. I don't want to say it, but they're filthy. They're filthy. And I'll explain why they're filthy at the end. So every time Arsenal scored, obviously I'm elated. I'm happy. I want to celebrate. But everyone next to me, they're like, oh man, ref, this, that. And I had to just jump in on it, to be fair, because obviously I don't know what's going to happen. If I celebrate an Arsenal goal, the way some of these Scousers are, I probably won't leave with both my eyes. So the game goes on. And then when obviously the game concludes, everyone's unhappy. Like, man, how did Arsenal win? How did we concede 5 goals? And I'm like, yeah, man, we need to strengthen up our defense. Maybe we need to attack some of the Arsenal players more, yeah? So I'm walking away with my friends. And we're walking, and we're looking around. And it looks like, honestly, I'm from London. It looks like a different environment where all of these Scousers, they're acting uncivilized, in all honesty. Yeah? They're acting uncivilized. So we're walking, and we see 3, 25, 30-year-olds. They're going past the Arsenal bus. Arsenal's bus is massive, massive coach, yeah? I don't know if it's holding the fans or it's holding the players, yeah? But we're walking past and we see these 3 guys, they go behind the coach. And, subhanAllah, they pull out their private parts and like in broad daylight. This is what, 3 o'clock, I think? And they just start urinating on the bus. Why? Because their team lost? They're like, I don't understand how urinating on a coach has anything to do with their team losing. But my point is demonstrating what this bond does. It's so fragile. Nothing regulates them. They treat it like it's their whole life. And when things don't go their way, all hell breaks loose. This nationalism is so weak. It's so fragile. Even you see the local feuds that happen in the area, they all get put on pause for England's national team. And then when England stop playing, everything carries on again. It's such a weak bond. How are you bound like that? It lacks purpose. And Muslims, we want to be like them. We feel like because we live in this country, we want to act like them. We feel like, the English are superior. They're not. When you actually look at some of the antics that happens because of this dirty disease of nationalism, Muslims, you want to stay well away from it. So back to the question, why are they uncivilized? It's because they believe in liberalism. They let their desires be their God. And nationalism comes into it. It's because there's nothing to regulate them. Everything that we see around this culture, around this football culture, is due to liberalism, is due to their void of not having a God, of them being secular. And because of this, they have to turn to nationalism. Otherwise, I think a lot of them would just kill themselves. I think a lot of them would just literally just live in darkness. Imagine if they didn't have alcohol. Ya Rabbi. I don't think they would survive. And it's not a coincidence that the biggest killer in men is suicide because of this void that they have. This emptiness, this lack of purpose. So it's not surprising to see the amount of alcohol consumed, the amount of cocaine consumed, the amount of heroin consumed. It's because this void, they try to fill everything in it. And it's still empty.
So what's the MO?
The MO, nationalism is a disease, and Islam came to cure it. When you see the context of when Islam came, you saw that the amount of tribalism that existed and the amount of wars due to that was so rife. We saw the Aus and the Khazraj. They were fighting for 10 years over a camel. We saw the superiority of the Quraysh and how they used to look at other tribes. Islam came and eradicated this problem. This disease got wiped off when Islam came about. And the Quran, it mentions that there is a difference between people. Yeah, we can see that there's a difference between color, there's a difference between some features, some characteristics. And Allah Azza wa Jal mentions in Surah Hujurat that we made these differences so that you may get to know one another, so that you don't all look the same. So you can see that people are different and you can distinctly remember them. Now, this void that we mentioned before, Islam, it gives you a greater purpose. It gives you a meaning in your life. So we won't, as Muslims, when you have Islam as your purpose, you don't have that same void that they do. That's why you don't see Muslims, by and large, drinking. We don't involve ourselves in escapism, is because we have something better to look forward to. But when you have this secular liberal order, you have nothing. So then they grasp onto nationalism. They want to grasp onto something that bonds them, but that bond is so fragile. Now, watching football, it's not a problem. Even supporting a club isn't a problem. But how dare we? How dare we support England? When England is the same country that has bombed our lands, is the same country that is doing the atrocities, being involved in the atrocities in Gaza. Some Muslims over here are shouting and screaming for England national team, when the English army and the English institutions are involved in Gaza and they are the cause of the shouting and screaming of the Gazans. How can we be involved in that? That is the distinction. When you are watching football and if you are supporting a club, understand this, that you are supporting a colonizer. You are supporting the ones that destroyed and that worked tirelessly in the past and in the present to destroy Islam. So when you watch the finals or when you watch England next, understand what this context of supporting England means. So empty your cups of this intoxicating drink of nationalism. Sober up and fill it with the light of Islam.